Hey guys, it's Dr. Mudov today. We're going to be switching up just a tad bit today. Once or twice a month, I'm going to be just switching from our gruesome, scary, terrifying videos to something just a little different, so about 1 or 2 times a month. So with that, let's jump into it. On this day in 1943, a German ace bypassed an opportunity to shoot down a U.S. Army Air Force pilot. Second Lieutenant Charles, or Charlie, Brown was struggling to keep his crippled B-17 in the air. I looked out my right window, Charlie came to describe, and said right next to me was a German Bf-109. I closed my eyes and shook my head, as it was a nightmare. If I close my eyes and open them again, he'll be gone, I said. Well, Mr. Brown opened his eyes and looked to his right. What did he see? That exact same plane driven by Mr. Stigler, Franz Stigler. Franz Stigler never fired on Brown. Instead, he escorted these Americans out of German airspace, enabling this B-17 bomber to continue safe landing in England. Both men survived, and they would find each other decades after the World War II. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Brown and Stigler would spend their last couple of years as dear friends. It all started one cold night in December 1943. Brown was returning from a bombing run on a German factory. So Brown's plane was damaged badly, trying to come back from the bombing run to return home. One of his crew was dead, several more were injured. So you gotta imagine this guy's flying this flying fortress, literally, from a bombing run, getting shot by these anti-artilleries, exploding. He's got holes, he's got crew members probably flying out, dead, some are trying to help in the back. He's doing all this trying to head back home. At one point, Mr. Brown himself has lost consciousness, sending his plane into a deep nosedive. Well, this is probably from the gigantic holes in the side of the plane caused from the AA guns that are trying to shoot the plane down. With all that air and oxygen getting sucked out of the plane so quick, and all that stress in your mind from your buddies behind you dying, some of them probably getting sucked out of the plane with it, there's no doubt that's why he passed out. So after the deep nosedive he sent the plane into after falling consciousness, he did recover just in time to save the plane. So he pulled up on that sucker and got that thing probably shaking, rattling, probably more parts of the plane flying off, but he did manage to level that plane. Now when Stigler, the German pilot, caught up to the plane, he thought it was the most heavily damaged aircraft he has ever saw that was still flying. Now Stigler was in an odd position. He already downed 2 bombers that day, one more which would leave him one of the biggest medals that you could get from an ace pilot, which is the Knight's Cross. Perhaps even the decision not to attack the American plane would have been considered such a terrible offense that he could be executed for it. But yet, he looked at the plane. He saw wounded men, struggling men trying to pull their guys back into the plane, some trying to plug holes into their buddies' arteries to keep their blood from gushing out, all while flying and trying to take this all in. He couldn't take that action against them. He said, "I can't kill these half-dead people," he thought. It'd be like shooting at a parachute. Stigler wanted Brown to land his plane, but Brown had no intention of landing in Germany territory. Stigler tried to wave at Mr. Brown towards Sweden, which would have been neutral territory and not a bad place to land. Stigler didn't think Mr. Brown had any chance of making it to England, and that gigantic B-17 bomber, holes everywhere, barely, probably running on fumes, barely just putting across the sky as it is. For his part, Brown was mostly terrified. Why was the German pilot waving at him like that? Did he want Mr. Brown to surrender? Before too long, he had enough though. He had his limited ability to fire on Stigler, but he mentioned at his gunners to try anyways. By then, Stigler was getting worried that he'd either be shot down by this B-17 full of Americans, or he'd be discovered by another German pilot and be looked as a traitor. He looked at Mr. Brown, saluted, and turned around. Safely out of German airspace, Brown would make it back to England, but just barely. What had happened? It was just nearly 50 years before Brown got a real answer to his question. In 1986, he began looking for his mysterious German pilot who had spared his life and his crew. Stigler would say the two men were practically friends before they even met. It was like meeting a family member or a brother you haven't met in 40 years. A video of him meeting Brown for the first time shows him fighting back tears. "I love you, Charlie," he says. The two men ended up collaborating together on a book, and they would actually end up dying just months from each other in 2008. The war left them in turmoil, a Zerba co-author of their book. When they found each other, they found peace. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a comment in the comments section. And as always, be safe out there.